Okay, so today, as you have been undoubtedly aware, the 200 most powerful marketing weapons are driving me crazy. If you look at the website, you'll see that just a couple people are seeing them, but we're seeing some other activity on all the other ones. So what we're going to move into today, we're going to move into, again, some more of the 2011 Mike Ferry retreat, the one-on-one retreat, which is coming up on the 23rd, I guess it is. So if you're going, great. If you're not going, then this will be something that we'll go over today, some of the ideas from last year, and that way when we get back we'll go over some more of those from this year. But to start off, what we were talking about earlier, we were talking about the skills it takes to make a lot more money in 2011, and they're equally applicable today. So for 2011, one of the skills that Mike talked about was skill number 7, okay, and Julie, I think you can take a special note in this, is the skill of showing property, in a way that will cause buyers to buy, okay? It is a skill. Because we as realtors, when we go through school, we're not taught exactly how to show property. We're just kind of going off the commercials and the Seinfelds and the other shows that you've seen where the realtor will come in, he'll say, okay, this is a living room and this is a bathroom. And usually all the scenes that you see are very negative in nature, so it's not a lot of fun. But the thing I think that's important to remember, and Mike tells us, okay, is number A, we don't confuse the buyer. That's kind of important. Don't confuse the buyer by showing them a lot of property, okay? You know it and I know it. We have a tendency to think that we're going to go out and take this one buyer or buyers and put them in the car and then drive them around for endless hours until they buy. That's just not a very good strategy. Okay, this is not a campaign to wear them down. This is simply something that should be enjoyable, but more often it should be something that should be productive. Okay, I don't know if you've ever spent time in an MLS tour. Have any of you? No? Okay. In an MLS tour, and some of the companies even today still do tour, where they will go ahead and line up 6, 7, 8 properties. The realtors were starting at this one, and then they will work their way throughout. At the end of the story, at the end of the showings, they'll write down what they thought of each property. The idea being you can take this paper to the seller and say, look, this is what everybody else thinks about your home. That's why we need to do X, Y, or Z. If you look at the actual tour itself in the beginning, okay, it starts out great. If your home is in the beginning, then it's okay because you're going to get some good remarks and people are going to think things and they're going to write it down. But if you're towards the end, you're going to get very limited stuff. Price seems low. Price seems too high. I don't remember. That's what you're going to hear a lot of. And we're in the profession of knowing business. How much is that buyer going to remember when you take them and put them in a car and show them 7, 8 properties and you can't even remember it? So Mike says what you want to do is limit it to 3, maybe 4 showings at a time, okay, per appointment. And Julie, the big thing for you when you're showing property, I know you tend to do buyers, the big thing that you want to do is when you're showing 3 or 4 properties at a time, it will limit the amount of time that you spend with your buyer. So that way you're not out there for endless hours, okay? When they say, hey, we want to see 5, 6, 7, 8 homes, you say, I'd love to, however, I have another appointment. Let's schedule that for tomorrow, okay? That way you're doing them a favor by making sure you don't get them confused. The second thing that Mike says about buyers, which is a skill, again, is remember that if you have them pre-qualified, okay, when you have them pre-qualified and they go through the hassle of talking to a lender, it's even better if they're pre-approved because they've been showing some W-2s, they've filled out an application, 1099s, 1003s, whatever it is that they filled out. okay, that shows that the buyer, okay, is there for the purpose to buy. Okay? They have the intent to buy. It's important to remember, okay, look, okay, I'm going to hold an open house, let's say, okay? And I'm going to have, in my open house, I'm going to put out a whole bunch of signs everywhere, because more signs equals more what?
Call.
More calls, okay, more buyers, more people. The more signs you put out, the better your odds. So I'm going to be there, and I'm going to be there with my lender. And let's pretend that I'm going to tag team this open house. I'm going to have me, and I'm going to have another agent there. And we switch off buyers. And we have a lender with us, okay? If you've not had a chance to take a look at this, look at the Open House on Steroids on the Sell More Homes Now channel on YouTube, and you'll see a video, a guy named Jay Kinder in Oklahoma doing this open house fashion, and what he has is 2 of his buyer's agents and 1 lender. And the lender will pre-qualify them instantaneously. And then they will be able to go show property. Kurt Stinson told us a great tool, a great technique he used to use. He and his wife used to hold open houses back when he first started, and he would go show property. He would have 2 or 3 properties lined up in that neighborhood nearby that he would know about, that he would preview, and then when people came to see the open house, he would say, great, let's go see these other ones too. And more often than not, he would pull a sale. But it's important to remember that if they are going through the hassle of being pre-qualified, then they have the intent to buy something, okay? So don't show property if they're not pre-qualified. Not only does it waste your time, but you don't know if they're really serious. Not only can they, but will they? So don't make that mistake, okay? You see, all right, let's just put it down this way, okay? Look, you make selling more complicated than it needs to be, okay? Because when you're out there in front of the public, let's look at this. They want to buy, yes. Okay, they've been through the pre-qualification steps. They want to do something now because you've already talked to them to try and figure out when they wanted to get it done. What's the only thing that stands between them, their motivation, and their ability to the house that they want? What's the only thing that stands in the way? Us. We make the thing more complicated than it needs to be. And why do we do this? Why do we make it more complicated, harder for ourselves, for them to buy a home than it really needs to be?
We always throw in our opinions that shouldn't count.
Exactly. Right. We throw in our opinions, okay? Is it your house? No. It's not our house. You're not going to live there. Well, I've got to fight for my client. No, you're not there to fight for your client. You're there to get the client the house. Don't lose sight of that, okay? Because in the end of the day, if you fight for your client, you throw in your opinions and you do all these terrible things, you're not going to get them what they want, and you're going to fail them, all right? Because that leads into C, all right? If they want to buy the home, if they want to buy, what should we do?
Sell it to them.
That's right. Let them. Let them. See, the cold hard reality is, okay, when we're dealing with buyers and they say, I don't know, what are the payments? What does that mean to you? When you hear somebody tell you, what are the payments?
They're interested in it.
They're interested in it. They would never ask that question if they had no interest in buying it. Okay? If they ask you questions like, well, what are homes selling for in this area? That's a buying sign. Don't say, well, I think they're overpriced. A good answer to that would be to say, well, you know what? Let's go back to the office and let's sit down and figure it out. Let's have a cup of coffee. Okay? That's a great close. Let's go have a cup of coffee. That, believe it or not, is a great close. Works for you every time. Okay? If they're serious and they want to buy, and you say, well, let's go to the office, let's look at the numbers, and let's have a cup of coffee. You'll be able to bring them to the office and write an offer. You can't write an offer that easily on the hood of your car. Okay? You can, but it's a little more difficult. Okay? The 8th skill that Mike says we need to learn in the 2011 one-on-one retreat, the 8th skill is the skill, okay, of dealing. The skill of dealing with the buyer problems and objections. Okay? Their problems, their objections, their excuses as to why they can or can't do something. Okay? It's a skill. Now, Julie, let me ask you a question. You'd recently had a transaction that was a little bit, what would you say, difficult?
It was extremely difficult.
Okay. So let's think this through. Let's reconstruct the train wreck, which was Ron and Sally. Can we? Yes?
Yes, Ron and Sally.
Okay. So Ron and Sally, how did you first get them? Let's step one. How did you get them?
They called off the ad that you ran for HUD Home back in September.
Okay, so they call off a HUD ad, okay. And you set an appointment, right?
Actually, I met them the same day to show them a house that was actually in the ad.
Okay, so you showed them a property, and were they qualified?
Yes, they were.
Okay, where were they qualified from?
They were pre-qualified from another lender that I normally don't use.
Okay.
Can't remember the name.
So they were pre-qualified. And did you end up writing an offer?
We were going to until we did a little more research, and the polyurethane pipes was not something that the buyer was interested in dealing with.
Okay, good. Did you end up showing him another home which you wrote an offer on?
Correct.
Okay, so let's call that property A. Okay? And so you write an offer on A. Did that offer get accepted?
It did.
Okay, good. And then what happened next? When you said it got accepted, was it in like a backup position, or was it regular position, or tell us about
No, the
that?
house that I finally ended up selling to them was a short sale.
Okay, so it was a short sale. And in the beginning, was it a backup position offer?
We were in first position.
You were in first position. Okay, so you were in first position on a short sale. What happened?
Well, we had to jump through the hoops.
Okay, so, but I think there's some points, maybe I'm wrong, but Ron and Sally, did they go to another realtor and buy another property?
Actually, they went to 2 other realtors, yes. They went to 2 other realtors, made 2 other offers while I was trying to get this short sale closed.
Okay, so you've got an offer with Ron and Sally on a property that is now either Kappa or something like that, and you're waiting to get the approval.
Correct.
And then in the meantime, they go out and they make offers, or at least an accepted offer on another property altogether, don't they?
Correct.
Okay, so they got one on A, now they got one on B. And then, as I recall, A's approval, your home, came through.
Yes, it did.
And when they were going through B, did they have to go ahead and cancel that contract, or whatever happened with that?
Yeah, they had gone through inspections, the whole 9 yards, and they had to go back, cancel that, and try and get their earnest money back.
Okay. And during this time, were they calling you a lot, asking you questions about that property?
All the time.
All the time. Okay. All right. So now at this point, you have an offer on one property. While you're waiting to hear about it, they go out, they place an offer with another agent on another property. They're having problems with their inspections, and that they call you, but they don't call the other agent. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, and then you get the approval. And then they have to go through the hassle of canceling on B so they can take A, right?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then moving on, you now have to close. You did your inspections, yes?
Right.
Okay. What sort of problems, if any, did you have with the inspections?
Was there a problem with our inspections?
Yes. Did you have any?
No, no.
Good, okay.
The inspections went smooth.
All right, good. And then you start going down to the closing part. Did you have any closing problems?
We had 2.5 weeks of underwriting challenges.
Wow, 2.5 weeks of underwriting challenges. And those underwriting challenges, didn't they have to do with a bankruptcy from his son?
Yes, they did. Actually, the son filed bankruptcy. This was the second time he had filed bankruptcy.
And so, essentially, you had to prove that the son was not the borrower.
Correct.
For 2.5 weeks. Well, you had to prove that, and then the lender had to go ahead and come up with their documents again, didn't they?
Yes, they did.
Okay, all right. So let's just examine this, okay? First, she gets what most of us do. We get a call, okay, the lead from the marketing that you've done. You go out and you show the property, you pre-qualify them or have had them pre-qualified, and then they like the property, they write an offer, okay, you get it under contract. Yet this is where the problems start. They start, instead of calling you up and they say, well, look, we want to look at other property, they go behind your back, okay, and they buy something else, right? Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then some other problems that came up was with regards to the issue of the bankruptcy in the son and the underwriting, and then the out-of-state lender, or I'm sorry, out-of-town lender. So there's a whole lot of problems that she had to come up with. She had to get through the objections of this guy saying, well, I'm not going to cancel A, I'm going to cancel B. And then he had to come up with the excuses as to why this was not his son. You see, it's the skill of dealing with these objections and these problems and these excuses that you really have to work on. Because the better you are at it, okay, the more deals you'll get closed. Would you agree with me that when you get a deal under contract, that's just the beginning of fun?
Yes.
I mean, when you think about it, it's going to take, you got to sell a home 2, maybe 3 times before you'll get it closed, especially if it's a short sale, okay? So you got to be able to do that. And the biggest thing you need to understand is the difference between a condition and an objection. Now, if you've been around for a while, you'll know the difference. What is a condition?
There's an inspection problem, the roof has a problem.
A condition, probably put in a more dictionary type term, would be to say a condition is a situation that cannot be changed. Okay? So for example, you have a buyer. They want to buy a property, but they have no down payment and bad credit. Can they buy a property? No. Not in today's lending market. If you have no money down and no credit, you have no chance of getting a home. That's just the way it is. Okay? Now, you could, if you had terrible credit, but you had a lot of money, you could go get an owner carryback or something along those lines. Right? But a condition is something that cannot be changed. Yet we as realtors like to pound and pound and close on somebody that really can't change that. And that's why salesmen have bad image. Okay? It's because they don't know the difference. An objection, on the other hand, is what? What is an objection?
Well, somebody can handle if somebody's questioning.
Yeah, it's exactly right. It's a question, okay? A question that remains in the mind of a prospect.
And it may be as simple as a request for more information, something simple. Really.
It could be a question that remains in the mind of the prospect that is just unanswered. So when they say something to you, we want you to cut your commission. Is that a condition or is that an objection? It's an objection. It's exactly right. Because they're trying to figure out what's the question. Why are you worth 6%?
Yeah.
Right. Julie, when they say to you, we aren't sure if we want to buy this house in this market, what could the potential question be in their mind?
Value.
Value. Right. They may be concerned that the values are dropping so fast that if they buy now, tomorrow it'll be worth less. So is that a condition or an objection? It's an objection. Okay? Your skill of dealing with objections, knowing the difference between conditions and objections, is crucial to your success. Okay? And really, if there's only a few objections, there's not many. We've got 9 seller objections and about 5 or 6 buyer objections. If you know that they're not changing, just learn the answers. Okay? They don't come up with buyer seminars and seller seminars on how to give agents new, objections. But if you go on the web, you could find 5 million ways to handle, I want you to cut your commission. 5 million ways to do it. I want to give you a 90-day listing. Okay? That's one that has stumped agents for years. Okay? It's not new. It's been around forever. Learn the answer. Okay? I'm sorry, I can't do that. Our company policy is 6 months. Any other questions? You know what I'm saying? I want you to cut your commission. No. Any other questions? Well, how come you won't? Blah, 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 blah. Okay? Learn the objections. Julie, if you learned the buyer objections, that would probably go a long way to help you make dinner, help you a long way to make more deals, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So especially, objections over the phone. Why they shouldn't see the lender. Why they shouldn't, why can't you just give me the address, etc. Okay? The next skill. The next skill that Mike talks about, okay, is the skill of getting a contract signed. Getting a contract signed. That's an important skill to learn. Okay? It's important, especially if you can get it on the first close. Because then you waste little time. Okay? It's easier if your presentation is strong. Okay? If you think about it this way, okay, you're in front of a client, whether it be a buyer, whether it be a seller, and you have a presentation to make, or even on the phone, okay? You have a presentation to make, right? You're giving your presentation, your listing presentation, your on the phone presentation, your buyer presentation, okay? Whatever it is, the presentation that you're giving, if it is strong and if it's compelling and if it makes sense to the client, okay, is it in their best interest to agree and sign? Absolutely. Okay, so here's the deal. Let's play a game. So I'm going to go to Alex, and I'm going to go to Alex's house, and I'm going to sit down. Right when I'm starting to come over to his house, his initial belief, most likely, is that I, in fact, know how to sell a home. Would you agree with that? Right, okay. He knows when I come over, I can sell a home. That's why he has me over. If I'm a plumber, okay, he's not going to invite me over. He's having me over because I know how to sell a frickin' house. So I come into his house. Now it's presentation time. From the moment I step across the door to the moment we sit down, it's a presentation. Hi, how are you, Alex? I'm pleasure to meet you. Thanks for showing me your home. You mind if I take a quick look around? Great, have a seat in the kitchen. I'll be there in a minute. I'm walking around, I'm taking a look at things, and I sit down. Now the presentation has begun. I've come through, they've had a chance to size me up. I've not said anything stupid. You're ready to go. at the presentation itself, okay, if I make a compelling argument, and when I say argument, I don't mean, oh, you should do this and you should do that and close. I'm not saying that. I'm saying a case. If I built a strong case to show Alex why this is in his best interest, how would I do that? How would I take and make a presentation, okay? How would I make a presentation for a buyer or a seller that will help them see that this is the way to do it? How do I do that? Okay. One of the ways that you start off, okay, is by pre-qualifying. The pre-qualification process, whether it be with a buyer or a seller, okay, is to find out if you can help them. Because you may not be able to. You may be looking at this situation and decide, I'm not sure if I can even help you. You might be so far underwater, so far behind in your payments, that I can't actually close the deal. So I've got to pre-qualify this. Pre-qualifying does a couple things. It determines, okay, a need for your services. It also determines the ability. It determines if I have the ability in which to close. If there's the ability to perform what he or she needs done. Pre-qualifying also helps you determine motivation. Because selling a home or buying a home is not easy. Now, let me ask you a question, Julie. When you were talking to your clients, okay, Ron and Sally, they had at least some motivation, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, they'd gone through a whole lot of process. They'd bought a couple homes. They had a couple home inspections. They've done a lot, right?
Right.
Yeah, so their motivation is high, okay? They had a need. They have the ability. Do you have the ability to help them? Well, yes, okay. They have the motivation. Okay, great, all right. But the thing is, okay, you have to be able to discern their need. You have to be able to discern their ability. You have to be able to discern their motivation. But out of all of this, motivation is the most important thing. They can have a need to sell their home. They may need to sell it. There's no question about it. And you may have every ability in the world. You may be the best trained salesperson to make it happen. But if they don't have the motivation to fill out the paperwork, to go to the lender to get qualified, they don't have the ability, or the motivation, I should say, to fill out the paperwork needed for a short sale, then it doesn't matter how high these are if their motivation is low. Okay? So because in your pre-qualification you've discovered what the need is, okay, again, going back to the example of me being in Alex's house, okay, I take his needs, my ability, and his motivation, okay, on one side of the equation, all right, and then I go ahead and match this, all right, same thing goes for buyers. I take this and I match it to a presentation which is nothing more than a scripted play. That's all it is. It's a set of words that you always say. And anybody who thinks that they don't like to work off a canned presentation is lying. Because you say the same things every single time. Whether or not you work with like a Mike Ferry script or a Tom Ferry script or a Brian Buffini script, you always say the same things over and over regardless. The problem is your can is not as efficient as it could be. So what you're doing is you're playing the part, okay? Now, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar But let's take a look at this. Who, if you know, is Marshall Mathers? Does anybody know who Marshall Mathers is? No? Maybe you know his alter ego. His alter ego, his stage name, if you will, is Eminem. Eminem. That's his alter ego. That's his stage name. That's by who he goes with. That's who everybody knows. But nobody knows who Marshall Mathers is. Okay? It is a play. It is a part. Okay? Let me try and get back to maybe some of your guys' generation. How about this? How about Gene Simmons? Everybody knows who Gene Simmons is, right? No, it's not that. You're thinking Richard. Gene Simmons, okay, was the head singer, if you will, right, of Kiss. And Kiss in the early 70s had a great way to go ahead and attract a following of people. They'd come out in the craziest outfits. Boots, makeup, hair, spikes, everything. And kids went crazy because it was something that their parents hated. Okay, maybe you guys are starting to get the picture. How about these people? How about some guys from England, the Beatles? Remember, when they came over, the Beatles were very controversial because they had long hair down to their earlobes, right? How about Elvis Presley? Elvis Presley had a hair lip. He had a problem with speaking. He was incredibly shy. He had a whole lot of self-esteem issues until he put on a guitar and then started to sing. And then next thing you know, he's on the Ed Sullivan Show, shaking his hips. And they had to carry it from the waist up there. You see, the thing is, this has got to be you. You have got to have a play. You've got to have a part. You've got to be somebody that you're not. Because if I come into their presentation with their needs, my ability, and their motivation, and I'm Carl, I just like to hang out and play video games and maybe sit around the house and watch movies on the weekend and eat popcorn. Who the hell wants to be with me? Nobody. Julie, Julie, do you really want to hang out with me? No. Judy has a hard problem with it too. And the fact is, but when I come in here, okay, I have a part to play. I have to be a certain way. And the same thing goes for you. You've got to be Superman, okay, or Superwoman. How long do you have to be that way? 30 minutes. Once a day. One time a day. You can be, sad sack all day if that's what you chose. But one time a day, you went out of control. You were over the top. You were completely enthusiastic and you were excited to be there and you were able to convey to them, I can go ahead and meet your need. I have the power to make it happen. You have the motivation. Let's go. That is a presentation. It's taking these items, your ability to go ahead and convey somebody of power, somebody of strength, somebody of wisdom, somebody who has a plan, somebody who's an island in the storm that they're facing. And honest to God, if you think for a moment that they are in a situation that is perfectly okay, you're fooling yourself. They're in a hard place. They got a yoke on them. They're in a precarious situation where they find themselves losing their home, going through a divorce, trying to find something bigger, having to downsize, the kids went away, or they're trying to find something a little bit bigger, or maybe it's their second home, they're moving out from a mobile home, who knows? But the fact is they're in a storm. don't assume that they got it together, because they don't. They don't have it together. If they had it together, you would never be there. Their home would be sold. If they didn't have a need, they wouldn't ask you to come over. Don't ever forget that. But you come in as the person who can make it happen. And I don't care if it's the first day on the job for you or if it's the 10th millionth presentation you ever given. If you have a well-scripted, well-thought-out play that you can give that addresses these three needs, you will get that presentation and you will get it signed every time. That is for the listing presentation. The problem is that we come in with no motivation, no understanding whatsoever of what they're going through. We have no complete picture if you can even help them. It has to be strong. They expect you to close. That's what you do. Don't disappoint them. Don't disappoint them. Now, it doesn't mean that you need to be a jerk. It doesn't mean that you need to be hard. It doesn't mean that you need to be, a complete prick. It just means that, you need to go ahead and be responsible and say, look, you've got a problem. I've got the solution. I can do it. Let's make a decision. That's why the Mike Ferry script is very clear and says tonight, one of three things is going to happen. You're going to make a decision to hire me. You'll decide not to hire me, or I'll decide not to hire you. And any one of those is fine. When you have that kind of strength of conviction, a decision will be made. Number 10. The skill, Mike says, of bringing buyers and sellers together. Okay? Buyers and sellers together through effective negotiations. See, the problem is realtors tend to think that they're all great negotiators, when very few of them really are. I mean, let's just think about some of the great negotiators, okay? If you had to pick one of any contemporary or historical figure that would be a great negotiator, who would you envision?
Winston Churchill.
Winston Churchill. That's interesting. Why Winston Churchill?
He brought countries together.
Right. He brought countries together. That's a great one. Winston Churchill, all right, brought together FDR, okay, and said, hey, look, we would need your guns. We need your ammo. We need your planes. I know your Congress says we can't help you, or you can't help us, but maybe with the Lend-Lease Act, you can help us fight the Germans before they get to you. Julie, if you had to pick one, who would you think it would be? Would be a great negotiator? You have one in mind?
No, not right off the top of my head.
How about this one? How about my favorite would be Donald Trump.
Oh, Donald.
Donald Trump. The Donald. That's right. You see, you say what you want about Donald Trump, and yes, he does have a whole lot of peculiarities about him. But Donald Trump, okay, think about it. Let's look over his life. In The Art of the Deal, one of his books, he described how he was billions of dollars in debt. Billions with a B. And yet, instead of being foreclosed on, instead of being called to the carpet, instead of having his money taken away and being destroyed financially, he was able to negotiate his way out with the banks. He was able, later on, to go ahead and negotiate where the Trump Tower is now. He was able to go ahead and negotiate and revitalize areas of New York City that are now very popular. And he did it with next to nothing, with no name. He came from, I believe it was New Jersey. Okay? and he came to Manhattan, all right? They look at New Jersey like they're illegitimate cousins. And yet, this guy with no name is now one of the richest men in the world because of his power to negotiate. Now, we as realtors tend to think we are on this level where we're bringing couples and countries and deals together, and we're dealing with a $50,000 trailer on the southwest side of Tucson. Okay, let's just get real here. The thing that you can look at with these particular people, Winston Churchill, Donald Trump, any of these people, you look them together and you're going to find out certain characteristics. Number A, okay, you don't get personally involved. Don't get personally involved. See, the thing is that we tend to take what the other agent says or does, the Fast Eddies of the world, if you will, and then we assign a name or we assign a characteristic or whatever to that person, and we say, oh, that person's just doing X, Y, or Z. That's how they are. Don't get personally involved in this thing. This is just a deal. Okay? It's not your house. It's not your money. It's not your decision. Keep that in mind. The second thing that you need to remember when we're talking about the skill of negotiation, okay, is that you don't let your commissions get in the way. What do I mean by that? Do I mean, it's a couple grand here or there, and so therefore we should cut our commissions to make the deal happen? No, you don't let the commissions get in the way. That means you should never have it there to begin with. The commission on your listing agreements, okay, are a sole and separate item from the negotiations. I can't tell you how many times I've seen it, and you've seen it, I'm sure. Agents will say that the buyer will buy the home for $182,000, and the seller agrees to pay the buyer's agent 3.5%. Okay, first, it's wrong because it affects the buyer's ability to buy. Second, it's wrong because you're going ahead and breaking ethics rules. And then the other reason why it's wrong is because you're causing friction within the deal with the other agent. Okay? If you want to make sure your client doesn't get a house, do that. That's a great way to do it. The third thing that you need to do is keep your ego out of it. Oh my God. Woo! Ego. The three smallest letters in the alphabet that cause the greatest damage when put together. Ego. I face that problem. I'm sure you face that problem. Ego, we tend to think that we're God's gift to selling. We really do. And Judy was really good at helping me with this. Judy, as you know, is my fiance, and she works at the pediatric intensive care unit. And I would come home and I'd say, man, I can't believe this seller or this buyer, and this deal's going to fall apart because blah, 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 blah. And I'm not going to make a couple $1,000s. That is my ego talking. She would simply say, I know what you mean. It's tough. I had a bad day too. A little kid died today. That tends to put things in perspective. Okay? Keep your ego out of it. You're not a pilot. A pilot screws up, 200-something people die. You're not a doctor. Okay? You might make more than a doctor, but if the doctor screws up, they die. You make a mistake, what happens? You got to sell it again. Get more sign calls. D. The next thing, ask straightforward questions. Ask straightforward questions, okay? Get to the point. Because what happens is we tend to pussyfoot around and kind of hide the bigger issues. I got an offer for your property, Mr. Seller. You're going to be so happy. And it's wonderful. They're going to be like, great. You say, come on in, let's talk it over. Perfect. They hop in the car, they speed over, they're ready to get there, and they get out and they're like, yeah, we got an offer. It's wonderful, perfect. And they bring them into the office and give them, hey, you want some coffee? Yeah, absolutely, I want some coffee. Everybody's, oh, that's so great, we're having a great time. And then you start making your offer, and you say, okay, well, look, here's the offer, Mr. Seller. It's a great thing. By the way, and you start covering the price. And they don't ask for any closing costs, and they're not asking for this, and oh, look at here, they're pre-qualified. What does the guy want to know? What's the price?
What do I get?
What do I get? Get to the point. Mr. Seller, look, don't get personal, okay? Don't get your commissions in the way. Keep your ego out of it. Mr. Seller, here's the deal. It's not what you wanted. But I think we can work with it. I know you wanted 120. But the best at this time the buyer's willing to give you is 110. Then ask him a straight question. Will you take this deal? Yes, no. It's simple. Well, no, I will not. Okay, great. Then let's figure out what would work for you and move on from there. Okay? Those are the 10 skills that Mike says we really need to know and know well to be making more deals happen for ourselves, have more money, more freedom, more ability to do more deals. More, and more. There's nothing wrong with more, incidentally. More is better. There's nothing that money can't solve, except poor health. You don't want to have poor health that is bad. But if you had poor health and you had a lot of money, at least you'd be able to afford good doctors. So that's not too bad. So the next thing that Mike started going into that day was the hardest part of the Mike Ferry system. Mike said the hardest part, okay, the hardest part of doing it is overcoming your past so you can grow. You see, the problem is you can spend 10 years in this business and develop so many bad habits. It's so easy to do. You can learn how to send out mailers. You can learn how to send out open houses. You can learn how to do things your way. But the problem is when you start to do that, you assume that it's the only way. You see, Tucson is a little speck in the great map of America. Tiny little speck. It's not even as big as, say, Phoenix, and Phoenix is not even as big as San Diego. San Diego's not even nearly as big as LA. LA is just about as big as New York and Chicago and Florida. The thing is, when we are one agent in a tiny little town and you're selling 20, 25 deals a year, you think that's the best way and the only way that things will work. Dan Beal in his interview had mentioned something that I thought was really important. He mentioned that it's important that you go ahead and you get a mentor to help you out locally. And the reason for that is so that you can find out what certain practices are done locally that maybe are not appropriate someplace else. So for example, a great example, when I came here, I started selling real estate in Charleston, South Carolina. In South Carolina, if you wanted to make an appointment to see a home, you had to call the listing agent's office. The listing agent would then therefore go ahead and make a call to the seller, see if a time was good, then they would take that information and call back to the selling agent and say yes or no, 2 o'clock isn't fine, but 4 would be, or whatever. That was the way it was done. Imagine my surprise when I come here and I find out that they call them directly. Imagine my surprise. You see, the thing about it is, a mentor here says, no. If you have everybody call like they used to in South Carolina, like you're used to, you'll never get a showing. Ricky Nielsen at Long Realty was my mentor. He helped teach me a lot. So it's important to get a mentor so you can overcome your past beliefs about the way things need to be. And then the other thing that Dan said was you need to get a coach nationally. And the reason why he said that is because you, living in a tiny little speck of a town in Tucson, Arizona, you don't know what works in Fort Lauderdale. You don't know what's working in Oklahoma. You don't know what kind of things they're pulling in San Francisco or New York, things that could bring you business. But because you've done things the same way over and over and over again, you will never get past what you've always done. And that is the hardest part. It's not the calling. It's not the canned presentations. It's not the objection handling. It's not the, moving to that and then moving to this in your schedule. It's overcoming what you think needs to be done. You think that you need to hold an open house a certain way. But if I told you, if you're going to hold an open house, hold it like this other guy does it in Oklahoma, that's a great way to do it. I saw it. I bet you it would work here. But because you refuse to be coached, you're cutting your own throat. Mike says that's the biggest problem. Because what we tend to do is we call it three things. We call it the 3 C's. You've heard when you're trying to sell a house and you talk to the seller, one of the problems or the programs that they have is put a sign in the yard, place it on MLS, pray that it sells, and then get paid. The 4 P's. Well, this is the 3 C's. The 3 C's. Okay, that people tend to do when they're approached with new ideas. And when you go to the 2012 Mike Ferry event, people are going to look at you cockeyed. And I'm just going to let you know right from the beginning. Because when you get back, they're going to say, oh, you went to the Mike Ferry con. Oh, okay, yeah, rah, chainsaw real estate, blah, blah, blah. I heard the same thing over and over. The thing is, the 3 C's that people will always hit you with. When you're doing good, they hit you with criticizing you. They criticize you. The next thing they do is condemn you. And then the next thing and last thing they do is complain. Now, I can't tell you. When people hate on you, that's what they do. They don't talk about all the good things you've done because they don't care. They don't care that you were able to help 65 families last year. They don't care that you were able to help 120 people get out of foreclosure and save their home or save their credit. They don't care that you've managed to go out and do 200 properties, okay, that were HUD homes. If you look at Sandy's, she's doing 200 something deals a year. You say, oh, well, the only reason why she's doing that is because she has a HUD account. Oh, Sandy, those HUDs are no good. And every time I have to turn around, I have to do something. And it's too much trouble. And Kurt, oh, that's just because he has a big team. And Carl, he's just this whole, chainsaw real estate stuff. The fact is, when you start doing numbers, okay, people will hate on you. If you're just like everybody else, you don't stand out. And when you don't stand out, what do they say? The nail above the wood gets hit the hardest. The other thing that's the hardest part, okay, is understanding that in this age of instant gratification, okay? You can take your remote, gratification, there we go. You can take your remote, you don't like something, click. You don't like something else, click. This doesn't work, click. What about this? Nah, that's not, click. This is boring, this is boring. You TiVo stuff, right? If you have popcorn, if it takes more than 3.5 minutes to cook, you're pissed, right? We have, what do they call them, instant dinners, microwave TV dinners and stuff, right? If you go to a restaurant and it takes that server more than 5 minutes to get you a drink, his tip goes down by 10%. That's if you tip him, right? Understand that success, okay, success takes time. You have a lot of bad habits to overcome. From another business, from your experiences as something else, you're starting over, and success takes time. If you're not willing to put in the time, that's the big thing. If you're not willing to put in the time it takes to do the work it takes, and it is work, okay, you can't close 65 deals on your own, okay, and have it be easy. You can't close 120 transactions or 200 transactions and have it go off flawlessly. If you're not willing to put in the time or the work or suffer, okay, suffer the ups and downs, the days you win, the days you lose, the people who quit, the people who complain, the people who cancel your listings, then you will not make it. Do yourself a favor. Quit now. If you're not willing to do the time, if you're not willing to do the work, if you're not willing to suffer what it takes to make it big, then do yourself a favor and get out. And to close, let me just quote something that Steve Jobs once said. Steve Jobs, undoubtedly one of the brightest minds of our century, he simply said, look, insane people are successful. He said you have to be insane to be successful. Because if you were sane, there is no way that you would do all it takes to become successful, to work the hours, to stay the time, to put in the effort, to be setting the ups and downs. He said you'd never do it. Because a normal person would quit. You have to have a passion. You have to be insane. So the hardest part, that's where it is. Tomorrow, we'll go ahead and continue with some more of these thoughts. It is Martin Luther King Day, so thanks for working. It is important. You're putting in the time. Any questions, comments, concerns, emotional breakdowns, overloads, anything like that? Yes? No?
No.
Okay, great. Then you all have a great day, and thanks for showing up. Take care.